So the Commonwealth phase starts with barrage. We have one artillery unit on the coast with a strength of 6, firing at the gooms. The 6 on the barrage table is reduced once for the density of the units in the hex. The gooms are only a company, so thin on the ground, and once for the terrain. And unfortunately we roll an 8, which isn't good enough, so the gooms survive. Further across at the top of the map as you look, we actually have 2 artillery units there, a 5 and a 4, so a total of 9. Once again, density gives a shift and terrain gives a shift, and yet again we roll an 8. Different die roll, but same result. In fact, exactly the same result. So that's the first 2 opening barrages met with no effect whatsoever. Now we move across into the Central Valley. The target of the artillery barrage this time is that 2nd Battalion, 29th Algerian. Again, it's a 6, you can see. So again, it costs them 2T to fire the barrage. Once again, we have a shift down for terrain and we have a shift down for unit density. There is only the Algerian unit in the hex. And this time we roll a 7. So again, sadly, no effect. That's 3 unsuccessful barrage attacks, and the Commonwealth decides to cut its losses and stop spending supply uselessly on small point barrage attacks. So we will move on to the combat phase. Okay, first combat of the first turn. 4 Commonwealth units against the gooms. You can see I've already reduced the supply entire by 1T. That's the cost of defending at full strength for the gooms. The Commonwealth have 4 units, so they will spend 1 SP, which we'll take from the supply dump in Haifa. 2 units of 6, a 10. So that's 18 to 2. 18 to 2 is 9 to 1. There is no 9 to 1 on the chart for close terrain, which is what the terrain is underneath that goom unit. So we drop to 8 to 1, so the starting roll is 8 to 1. Interestingly enough, the first thing we do is we roll for surprise, and the roll was a 4, or 2 2s and a 1, which is a 4 and a 1, which actually gives the defender surprise. So the odds shift 1 in the defender's favour, so it drops from an 8 to 1 down to a 6 to 1. Unfortunate for the Commonwealth, this campaign isn't getting off to a great start by the look of the die rolling. The action ratings I should have mentioned, which is, again, I mentioned it before, the black number in the centre of the counters. The gooms have 3, which is a reasonable rating, and as you can see, it's every inch as good as the Commonwealth's rating. So the gooms automatically, being the only unit in the hex, they are the action rating unit. The Commonwealth chose to use the Palmac unit, so they're both rolling on a 3, so there was no shifts, no adjustments to the combat. And the combat roll was a 9. Now a 9 on 6 to 1, which was the modified odds roll, gives us an AO1 DL 101. The AO1 means the attacker has to take an option, and he does it before the defender takes his option. It being so early in the campaign, and we also already know that obviously the result is also DL 101, so we know the Vichy are going to have to take 1 casualty regardless. Then there's an option, but obviously in this instance it's a single step Vichy unit. There'll be nothing left to retreat. The Commonwealth decide to take the option as a retreat rather than taking the loss from the unit. So that's exactly what they'll do. They will pull back one hex each, and of course the gooms will be eliminated. For For the combat at Ben Jabal here, we have 15 combat factors against 2. Again, Algerian unit, defending in reasonable terrain. I've already spent the 1T, which is actually in the same hex as the 8th Algerian there. Action ratings this time, we'll use the Cheshire unit, which has an action rating of 4 as opposed to the Algerian rating of 3. So we actually get a +1 on the dice for both the surprise roll and the combat roll in this instance. And it does instantly make an effect because we roll a straight 10 with a 2 follow-up. Now 10 gives you, even without the extra +1, 10 gives you surprise for the attacker. And we get 2 shifts from the outcome of that third die roll. So this time, instead of it just being an 8-1, it goes up to a 12-1, which is just as well because we actually then roll quite low. We rolled a 4, modified again, but that does give us exactly the same result as previously. So we get an attacker option followed by a DL 101, and we choose to do exactly the same thing again. So Cheshire and the other units will pull back, and unfortunately that's another Vichy unit off to the dead pile. Okay, this is the attack at Fick. It's going to cost the Commonwealth 3T to attack, 1T again for the Vichy. The odds work out at 16-3 or 5-1 in the open with a +1 AR. We just fail the surprise, but we then roll a reasonable 8, which is modified to a 9 for the additional +1 on the action rating. It does just give us an AO1 with an E4, which is the option of exploitation. We're going to miss out the exploitation because I know we will take the option to retreat. Because once again that DL1 takes care of the Vichy cavalry unit. So that's 3 attacks and 3 successful removals of Vichy combat units, I suppose. And so to the final combat, which is Daraa, here across on the far side of the board. This one's actually only a 3-1 in the open with a +1 because we'll use the Punjab unit as the action rating unit. Once again we roll middle of the road for surprise. We get a 7, so there is no surprise. And once again we roll an 8 for the actual combat roll. Obviously that's modified and it gives us an AO1 DL 101, sounding like a fairly familiar combat result. But again, good news for the Commonwealth because all the Commonwealth units can move out of the way, and the DL1 takes care of that Vichy cavalry company. So again, that's another unit off to the dead pile. So this quickly is the situation at the end of the exploitation phase. Well, with a caveat, the caveat being the commandos. Essentially what happened was the 3 units which you can see at 2406, so there's the Royals, the Cavalry and the Scots Greys. Scots Greys were released first. They ran up that road where the combat was in Bent Jabal, successfully captured the supply that was there, only 1T, but every little bit of supply helps. Continued along and grabbed that bridgehead at the Litani River, swiftly reinforced by the Royals and the Australian cavalry who came along the coast road, attempted to do the same thing and grab the supply entire. Unfortunately, just as they arrived, a brave Vichy soldier put the match to it and the whole thing went pop. So no supply from that nice little dump in Tyre. The commandos, I've put the 3 units in position there. You can see them, that was their intended landing zones. Just trying something different. I certainly wouldn't suggest it as a strategy, but I wanted to try it just to see if you could manage to land 3 independent units, which also cut the coast road at several points. It would give the Vichy quite a problem, I thought, so hence I thought we would try it, especially in this playthrough. Unfortunately, the rules were such that if we start at the furthest north, Keys had a horrendous die roll and did not land at all. Oh, that was the other thing, of course, these aren't necessarily the exact hexes that they were trying to land in. They are subject to drift, and I think 2 out of the 3 did drift. Next in line, this guy also failed to land, so it was a very bad day for the commandos, only 33% of them actually getting ashore. But Pedder did, and Pedder did right on the Latani River, so perhaps tenuously we have a bridgehead over the Latani River. Not sure that we'll take a huge advantage of it, because this is the end of the Commonwealth's turn, and let's see what the Vichy do in response.